Welcome aboard. 7 p.m. on Thursday night means it's time for the Better Sports Network's high-stakes fantasy football show. It is Fantasy Football Night in America. Hi, hello, how are you? I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC, the RotoViz High Stakes Lowdown, and the High Stakes Fantasy Football Hour. You can connect with me on the X at Eric Balkman. Tonight, I am welcoming in another person who has their hands in a lot of fantasy goodness out there. Rotoballer, the Get Real podcast, Sunday Dreamers. My God, there's a ton of stuff that this young woman has going on, and I'm proud to welcome on Kacey Kasem onto the show. Thank you so much for hanging out with me tonight, Kacey.
No, thank you for letting me come on your show. It's so awesome to be able to be a part of this. I really haven't gotten to actually interact with you, so this is fun.
Yeah, a lot of times when I'm bringing people on, like I just respect their work that they've done in the industry, and I'm like, it'd be cool if I could kind of trick them into hanging out with me for 2 hours, and we could talk fantasy with them, pick their brain. So this is kind of what we're doing tonight for that. I want right off the top, I want to ask you, the Get Real podcast. It's not your regular meat and potatoes fantasy football podcast. It's very unique. And I want to know sort of what you could tell us about that show and the inspiration on how you decided or why you decided to start it.
Yeah, for sure. So Get Real with Kacey Kasem is basically I go behind the scenes of the fantasy football industry. I talk to a lot of people that do work in this space and just kind of pick their brains, kind of get that. And the whole inspiration behind it was Matt Harmon back in the day, he had Backyard Banter, which was a behind the scenes. He talked to people in the industry as well, his friends and all of that. And there wasn't really a lot like that. And I was like, I really want to do something where I can converse with people and kind of like learn as I'm doing it, because I do a lot of stuff on my own, like the whole podcast. I do all of that on my own. I don't have anybody helping me with it. So I'm learning as I go. So I'm getting all kinds of tips and tricks from people. And it just kind of went from there. I tried to do a fantasy football podcast, didn't work out. And I was like, this is probably more my speed. It's just like having conversations with people.
Well, it's a few things, right? It's stuff that you like to listen to, and there's a lack of it in the industry. So then you go ahead and bring it forward to everybody else. It's something that you like doing. It's something you're good at. And I think it's a nice, it's just like you're a fly on the wall, like listening into your conversation. I know you had Overzet on. You had a ton of people on over the course of the life of the podcast. And it's just like you're kind of just sitting there taking it all in. And it's not like I'm not listening to starter sits for 90 straight minutes, right? It goes much deeper than that, and it goes kind of beyond fantasy football too, which is what I appreciate as well. So the Get Real podcast with Kacey Kasem, get that anywhere you get podcasts as well. We're going to get a ton of stuff off the board tonight into your minds as we broadcast all the way up until 9 p.m. Eastern time tonight. We'll take you through the first quarter plus of the Sunday night game between the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. If you are looking for some FFPC fun, check out the FFPC Weekly Challenge. There's no draft, no salary cap. You can pick 10 or 12 players. If you want to play with or without, if you want to play with or without kickers and defenses, you can choose that. Slim or classic, whatever you want. MYFFPC.com. Enter for as little as $35, win up to $2,500. Scan that QR code that our producer has put on the screen. That is Matt Deutsch working very hard behind the scenes tonight. Speaking of behind the scenes, scan that QR code. It'll take you right to myffpc.com, and you'll be able to enter the FFPC Weekly Challenge there. Coming up on tonight's show, Kacey and I are going to go around the NFL. We're going to get into our Thursday night football preview with San Francisco and Seattle. We'll also build a weekly challenge lineup ourselves that will hopefully assist you in maybe figuring out how to win that $2,500 or however many leagues you want to enter in over at the FFPC this week. That is coming up in the second segment. And then the third segment tonight, we will get into some starter sits, not for 90 minutes. It won't be that long, but we will get into a lot of stuff. And the great thing, Kacey, I think about this is like, we talk starter sits, but I think, there's a lot of stuff that goes into like what we discover about just fantasy football in general. We talk about Bucky, Irving, or Rachaad White. Well, there's something there about the Buccaneers running game. There's something there about the way we constructed teams. And I think that's what's great about this starter sit segment that we're going on is we're going to branch off into a lot of things tonight. We'll kick things off with Juan Pena Jr. watching us on YouTube. Should I trade Breece Hall and Tank Dell for Stephon Diggs? I got Kenneth Walker, Jerome Ford, Josh Jacobs, and Kyron Williams from a wide receiver, DJ Moore, Calvin Ridley, Jacoby Myers, and Wan'Dale Robinson. To me, I look at this, Casey, and I think we'll get into a larger conversation about Breece Hall here, but I don't necessarily think that this is the worst idea in the world. I mean, Braylon Allen, it doesn't seem like he's going anywhere. It looks like Juan is pretty much set at running back with Walker and Jacobs and Kyron Williams. And, when you have, I don't know who his number 2 receiver is, Calvin Ridley, maybe, when you could upgrade and get Stephon Diggs there too. This is a deal I'd make, even though we're kind of selling low on Breece Hall. But my goodness, your takeaways on Breece Hall this season, I don't know if he's hit his floor yet.
Yeah, that is so accurate. Isn't that weird to say? It's so weird to say. Like, I feel like this is something I'd probably get done too. I really like Wan'Dale Robinson right now. Mm-hmm. And, Jacoby Myers has been one of those guys that's been on my radar for a while, and we'll just see what that whole situation ends up being like over there. But yeah, Stephon Diggs, I would take a shot on that.
Yeah, this is the new normal right now. And I don't want to, we're not throwing out everything we thought about these players, what they're going to be in the preseason. Like, we're not throwing that all out, but we do have to adjust because we have, almost a third of the season already done. So we have seen how the Jets are treating them. Now, the one wild card I will say about this, and we'll kick things off by saying this, the Jets made a coaching change this week. Robert Saleh not in charge. Jeff Ulbrich has been promoted to interim head coach. He's also the defensive coordinator. And he said that Todd Downing, the passing game coordinator and quarterbacks coach, is now going to be making the play calls for the offense. Now, the wild card is here. Well, what if Braylon Allen is all of a sudden it's like a 90-10 split or an 80-20 split? Like, you are running the risk of that. I just don't think, it just seems like that's such a mess in New York that if you have Hall on your team right now, it's tough to see the light at the end of the tunnel there. And for anybody who has him, I think if, depending upon how you built your running back room, you might have already started benching Breece Hall, a healthy bench, which is crazy Tom Banana Pants, Casey.
Oh, no, it really is. Like, even writing about benching him just feels weird, or anybody. Like, just thinking of that Jets offense and going, okay, I'm really going to do this. But yeah, you kind of have to, unless, if you have better options. I know that's a cop out to say, but like, it just hasn't been, what have you done for me lately? And it just hasn't been.
Well, and you think about that too. Like, let's look at it from the standpoint of, if you did draft Breece Hall, you're probably not 4-1. You're probably not 5-0. You're probably more likely 2-3 or 1-4. And if you are in that situation, like, it's desperation time. Yeah. The FFPC regular season will last 12 weeks. We're almost halfway into that. And if you're already behind the 8 ball with, having a 1-4, 2-3 team, and you're not putting up points, you might have to make some drastic changes. And those drastic changes could be, again, if you're playing in the FFPC, benching Hall. If you're not, and you're playing in a league that allows trading, maybe trading him. Yeah. We'll see what happens going forward. Now, I didn't have this on the rundown, but I'm glad Permar99 brought this up in the chat. So the last 2 days in Buffalo, as the Jets get ready to take on the Bills have not had the services of James Cook. He has a foot injury, a toe injury, did not practice yesterday, did not practice today. What's wild about this and annoying about this, they play on Monday night. Yeah. So you kind of got to have, if you want to wait on James Cook, and God, hopefully he has a full practice either tomorrow or Saturday, and we can, just eliminate this as far as a conversation. But right now, Ty Johnson, Ray Davis, those are the players that would step in this situation if Cook were to miss. Permar says that the smart money is that Ty Johnson gets the start over Ray Davis. Is that how you see it right now? I don't know how I see it. And quite frankly, you may not have the opportunity to roster James Cook, Ray Davis, and Ty Johnson. Yeah, that's the problem.
That's the big problem. And I always find myself in those situations with the clump of guys where you're like, I can't roster all of these guys. You just don't have enough room to do that. I'm not sure how that situation is going to shake out either. I mean, I maybe give a slight edge to Ty Johnson, but I'm not really sure either.
I think if it were me, I I would be Ray Davis is probably already owned in your FFPC league. But if Ty Johnson's out there, I'd pick him up. I'd see what happens. But if it came down to 1 p.m. on Sunday and my next best option is available and Cook didn't get in a full practice, I'm sitting Cook, I'm playing it safe, and I'm playing one of my other options or whatever. I really don't want to wait around for Cook unless I have Ty Johnson on my team. I think that's the only way to play this right now. And is he going to get the start? I don't know. Ray Davis seems like he's more likely to get those low value, quote unquote, first and second down carries. But Ty Johnson might be the passing down guy. And if that's the case, I love the pass catching running backs. And then that would make sense to have Ty Johnson in your back pocket there. So that's how we're ruling on this, Permar. We'll wait. We'll find out what happens in practice tomorrow and Saturday. Adam Schefter, this is another big bomb, said that Michael Pittman is expected to be sidelined for multiple weeks. And there is on the table right now for Indianapolis that he could be placed on IR, which would be awful for him to miss the next 4 weeks. So what do? We roll with the punches, right, Casey? It's the only thing we can do. If Pittman is out, how does this change for you and it sounds like Richardson's going to be back this week too. How does this change for you with guys like Adonai Mitchell, with Josh Downs? Does Josh Downs automatically become like a top 25 option? Does A.D. Mitchell all of a sudden become like one of your two flexes in an FFPC league? This is wild because we would much prefer, if Pittman's going to miss, to have Flacco in at quarterback. But now we could have Anthony Richardson throwing to Flacco and A.D. Mitchell, which I think changes their value a little bit. How do you try to make sense of this situation?
It's really hard to make sense of this situation. And it's really not a situation that I want to be in. Luckily, I don't. Well, here's the deal. First of all, it's my fault that Michael Pittman, all this happened because I was finishing up an article about him. And then like 10 minutes later, they were like, hey, by the way, he's probably going on the IR. There's a chance he's going on IR. And so that was a lot of fun work out the window. But anyway, with that situation, if Josh Downs is healthy, then obviously I think that he's going to be the guy that steps up. It does stink with the whole Flacco versus Richardson.
Well, and the other thing
to monitor.
Right. And the better boss, Matt Deutsch, says, hello, Alec Pierce. And remember the Pierce games that he had earlier in the season with Richardson. So there is something to be said for that. He said, Permar says you can't even play Downs even as a wide receiver with Anthony Richardson at quarterback, which I think you could make that case depending upon, everybody's team is different. And maybe that wouldn't make sense for that team. But I could still see Downs in there as a flex if you needed him, depending upon, what your wide receiver room looked like. But this Pittman thing it just stunk. I'm not cutting him anywhere. Casey, you're still finding a way to keep him on your rosters, right?
Oh yeah, I'm still keeping him on my roster, so I'm not dropping him.
Another gut punch this week, and it just stinks because he got hurt. It looks like he got hurt. I watched the replay of that Nico Collins 66-yard touchdown a few times, and Casey, I think you can kind of see inside the 10. He does pull up a little bit. Did Nico Collins on that. And then now all of a sudden he goes from questionable to come back into the game to now probably missing this week to now being on injured reserve, which obviously stinks. This is a circumstance for Tank Dell and Stephon Diggs that is much richer for fantasy purposes rather than the one that we just talked about in Indianapolis. Now you're talking about Stephon Diggs being a borderline top 10 guy. Now you're talking about Tank Dell being like a slam dunk wide receiver too. In your lineups on your teams this week for FFPC players watching this, is this the recommendation that you have to find a way to wedge Tank Dell into your starting lineup somehow?
I think so. I think that this is very good for Tank Dell, obviously. I think that, Dalton Schultz has been one of those guys that hasn't, he's been Dalton Schultz. What are you going to do, And so, I'm not worried about that whole situation, I think you try to get him in there. I think that it's going to be, with CJ Stroud, all of that whole, it's completely different from Indianapolis. It is. It's completely different. You can definitely get him in there.
The other guy that Permar brings up too, that I did consider when I was placing waivers last night, and he said, there's not a lot of people that picked him up. was Xavier Hutchinson, who actually stepped up when Collins went down in that game against the Bills this past week. Hutchinson ended up with a final receiving line of 2 catches, 31 yards on 3 targets, along of 19. So he was not involved as Stephon Diggs. He was not involved. Quite frankly, he wasn't as involved as Dare Ogunbowale too. But Hutchinson's an interesting guy. I think he's the type of guy that I'll pick up, Casey, if I have the room. But like with, the bye weeks upon us, it's difficult for me to pick up a guy as a spec play that, okay, well, he's going to be playing in Collins' position. So let the fantasy, and I don't think that's what Permar's saying, is like he's not going to be Nico Collins. But I think there's just too many ifs for me right now. If I have a spot on my roster, then I could put him on. But it's tough this time of year when you're trying to just field the starting lineup.
It really is
to try to get a luxury like Hutchinson on your team.
Or if you're like me and you have like, in my redraft league, my home redraft league, all Vikings wide receivers, right? So like this week, it's like, what was I doing? But it's a home league, so you're not really paying that much attention.
That's true. And then the other thing too is like, where do you stand on this? Because I've heard both schools of thought where like some people like to load up all their guys on the same bye week, right? So then you're taking the L, you're putting up hardly any points that week, but the rest of the weeks, you should be stronger than your opponent. I've never drafted that way before. I mean, it's happened where I'm like, oh my God, I got 15 guys on a week 8 bye. But I don't know. When you're drafting, do you ever look at that, or is that something that you don't really consider on draft day?
I don't really consider it on draft day because I know that I pick so many guys up off the waivers and kind of churn that bottom anyway.
Which makes perfect sense. And I would agree. The team that you draft in week 1 is usually a far cry from the team that ends your season in week 17. The quarterback news, there's a couple of quarterback changes this week. Technically 3. We'll get into one of them right here. Spencer Rattler, not Jake Haener, will be taking over at quarterback for the New Orleans Saints, while Derek Carr is resting that, I believe, an oblique injury that's going to knock him out for several weeks. Spencer Rattler, the guy that, I mean, you think about going back to, he was on that Netflix documentary when he was in high school because he was one of the most highly touted recruits in the nation. Ends up getting some Heisman whispers at the start of one of his years at Oklahoma, never really materialized. He transfers to South Carolina. And then I believe he was the next quarterback drafted. He was in the 5th round. And wasn't it like we had all these first-round quarterbacks, Casey, and then we didn't have another quarterback drafted until Rattler in the 5th round. So this is wild. This is another rookie quarterback this year that's going to get a start. Superflex leagues, obviously you're adding them. Single quarterback leagues, obviously you're not starting him. What do you think he does for the rest of the Saints? What does he do? How does he affect Alvin Kamara? How does he affect Chris Olave? How does he affect Rashid Shaheed, Juwan Johnson, some of these other guys? What are you doing with those Saints skill position players this week with Spencer Rattler that maybe you wouldn't have done or would have done with Derek Carr?
I'm not sure if I was talking about this earlier. I'm not sure how much my mindset changes between Carr and Rattler, even though we don't really know like what Rattler is in the NFL, obviously. I mean, you drafted a bunch of those guys to start them. And it's kind of, you're probably in that situation where you have to start them anyway.
Right.
How comfortable, it's a little shaky because you don't know. I hate saying that you don't know, but you really don't how this is going to shake out. I know he can get the ball down. But I'm not sitting anybody that I would normally sit, and I'm going Olave. I'll put Shaheed in my Kamara. We'll see.
To me, like Kamara is a guy that I could easily see the Saints leaning on, right? At least until Rattler kind of gets his feet wet, gets some confidence. And it's so easy to, Kamara is such a talented pass catcher. Like you can dump it off to him and he could, it wouldn't surprise me at all if he gets double-digit catches this week. Olave I think you're right. I think like where you drafted him, he's difficult to sit. I just imagine if you drafted Breece Hall and Chris Olave on the same team, or Cooper Kupp for guys. It's rough sledding. I think that if there's one guy I would look at benching this week, out of any of those Saints guys. And I'm not saying I would. I think it's Shaheed based on I don't know what the chemistry is like between Rattler and Shaheed. I know what kind of draft capital I paid for Shaheed, so I know what other options I should have on my team. That would be the one guy I would say, okay, well, maybe I can make the case that I should be sitting him. It is a game against the Tampa Bay Buccaneers this week. That game is in New Orleans at least, but the Saints are 3-point dogs, a total of 41. So I don't know if we're going to see a whole lot of fantasy goodness in that game. And quite frankly, the other thing with Olave, is there anything wrong with him? I mean, because we haven't seen capital letters Chris Olave all season.
No, we haven't. It's been a season, hasn't it?
Yes, it has.
He's been pretty. Yeah, it's been. I wouldn't say Amari Cooper bad, but it's been. You're like, what is happening? What is happening? And when Shaheed pops off every now and then, and you're like above, he's above Olave, and you're like, I just don't. And Shaheed's also one of those players that you bench and he goes off and you start him and he gets you nothing. I know that's silly to say, but it's true. God, it's true.
I think the other thing too, if you are an Olave owner, is how frustrating it's been. Look at what the Saints did the first 2 or 3 weeks of the season, where they're just putting up 30 and 40 points.
Yep.
And Olave was okay, but it's not like he had a 3-touchdown, 150-yard game in any of those. The other thing that I think works in favor of Spencer Rattler here is the fact that he gets Clint Kubiak as an offensive coordinator who really helped open everything up for Derek Carr and really accentuated the strengths of everybody on his team. So if there's somebody who can get every last drop of NFL fantasy goodness out of Spencer Rattler this week, it's probably Clint Kubiak. So that works out. Permar 99, we don't know what Kendrick Miller is, a second-year running back we've barely seen. I don't know if we're going to see him this week, but I would imagine if we do, he's going to be on my bench. I can't. Even if he's active, I got to see something first.
Yeah.
And so Kamara is still the guy that we're going to be looking at. Scott Hoyt chiming in, longtime FFPC high stakes player. Any more intel on James Cook and Neighbors? We did briefly mention it. We talked about James Cook a little bit, but Malik Neighbors, I think, I don't know if I may not have it on the rundown tonight, Casey, but I am getting vibes that he is not going to play this week.
He's not been practicing. Yeah,
Go ahead.
No, I just kind of have that same vibes. I kind of feel like the wide receivers that are, Wandell and, Slayton, I think that they're going to be the ones that have to step up. So, yeah, I don't think he's.
It's my understanding, at least from reading what some of the beat writers said, that Neighbors was out on the field yesterday doing some stuff, but then the majority of practice today, he was on the bike, which is
it's not
good. And Slayton, I think, to your point, that's going to be the guy to look at. That's a Sunday night game, which is a little bit more difficult when you're trying to figure out what to do fantasy wise with some of these guys, especially considering we don't know about Devin Singletary yet either, and there's going to be people want to make a Tyrone Tracy decision there too. If Neighbors is out, Slayton, I think, is a sneaky flex again this week based on what he did last week. But I'm with you. I don't think we see Neighbors until week 7. What do I want to talk about next? Aidan O'Connell, the other AOC, as we say, for the Raiders. He is going to be starting this week instead of coming in for relief of Gardner Minshew as he did in weeks 4 and 5. He will actually start this week against the Steelers. Oh, brutal matchup. So you're not, maybe you're playing O'Connell in a super flex league. I'm more curious what you think about Bowers, what you think about, and especially Jacoby Myers. Like, I think if you drafted Bowers as good as he's been, you still got to lock him in there, even with the poor matchup, even with O'Connell in at quarterback. But a guy like Jacoby Myers is interesting. I know I think he's been getting limited practices this week. I'll have to look up to see what's going on with him.
So, yeah.
But against the Steelers, is he going to get Joey Porter Jr. treatment? I see messiness here. And the total on that game is at 36.5. So not exactly a Boffo fantasy performance from these two teams.
Yeah, it's really hard to feel comfortable starting most of those guys. Bowers, because like you said, where you drafted him, what you've been getting from him. I think he's probably one of those guys that's probably quarterback proof, at least at the moment. And even though this is kind of a difficult matchup and the game's going to be low scoring, Bowers is probably, just because of what the tight end landscape is right now anyway, you might as well, put him in your starting lineup.
Myers, actually, I was wrong. He did not practice yesterday or today. And now, mother of God, poor Aidan O'Connell. He's got to face that Steelers defense that's without the services of Devontae Adams, maybe without the services of Jacoby Myers. What would you make? Like, let's say Myers doesn't play. Can you envision a scenario where you feel all right starting Trey Tucker, knowing the target volume would be up, even though it may not be the highest efficiency game we've ever seen from him?
That's interesting because, when you look at it that way, but I still don't think I could feel comfortable doing that, especially this week, especially against that defense. So
sitting Tucker, I mean, basically, if your name's not Bowers, you're probably not starting. And even Alexander Madison, I don't think that's a desperation thing as well. So I would stay away from Tucker. I'm with you. Madison gets real difficult to play as well. There's one league I think that it's like two injured. It's like Chase Brown and Devin Singletary with Aaron Jones on a bye. And I can't remember who my other running back is. It might be Gibbs or something. And I'm trying to figure out, like, okay, is Singletary going to play? Is Chase Brown going to play? They're both Sunday night games. Yeah. But I would have to make the decision on Madison before, which is really frustrating.
That is brutal.
But hopefully we get clarity, right?
Right.
Hopefully we get clarity tomorrow.
Fingers
There's one
crossed.
more day of practice. Mm-hmm. We'll see what happens there. Let's talk about the Texans backfield. This just got interesting within, I would say, the last couple hours, because we found out that Joe Mixon, who has not played in forever, got in a limited practice today. This is the first time in 2 weeks that he got a limited practice in. Now, he had gotten a limited practice in prior to week 4, and he did not play. In fact, he has not played since week 1. So, okay, we'll follow this situation. But let's just say that he does not that he cannot go this week. Okay, well, are we going back to the Cam Akers, the Dare Ogunbowale? Well, DJ I'm butchering the name. I'm sorry, DJ. Reported that Dameon Pierce actually practiced in full today. So now, if Mixon doesn't play, Casey, are we just best to stay away from Akers, Ogunbowale, and Pierce? Or is there one of these three guys that you actually would like as a flex play this week? The Texans are going up against the Patriots. So it's a solid matchup. It's on the road, but this Texans backfield, just when we think it was going to get cleaner, got a little bit messier today with Pierce coming back.
Gosh, it sure did, didn't it? That is so murky over there. I'm not sure if I could feel comfortable doing that with having those guys all being options, and all those guys have, shown a little bit here and there, popped at different times and all of that. And the Joe Mixon thing, I don't think I even knew that.
Yeah, so it caught me totally off guard when I saw
that is something. So I don't know if
I thought I was looking at like a fake X account when I saw it. I thought he was still a ways away. But
I did too.
If Mixon's active, that's the only guy I feel comfortable playing. Right.
Yeah, right.
If he's not active, I think I just feel better looking elsewhere. I don't want to mess around with it.
Try to look elsewhere. Yeah. If you can pivot.
Let's talk about Devin Singletary, a guy I just brought up. He's battling a groin issue. Brian Daboll says that Singletary is trending in the right direction, which is good. That's what you want to hear. Maybe unless you are a Tyrone Tracy owner, because at that point, you would rather see Singletary sit one more game. So the latest we have on him, according to the New York Giants themselves, limited practice yesterday, limited practice today. It's a Sunday night game against Cincinnati. So if you have Singletary and Tracy, and Singletary's active, I would probably trot out Singletary. If they're both active, I would probably lean against starting Tracy. Tracy was awesome last week. 129 rushing yards, I think, on 18 carries, I want to say. He was great. And now we have to wonder, okay, how much is the split going to be? And if there is a split, are either one of these guys worth playing, Casey?
Yeah, I don't know if you can do that with the split. I'm not starting either of those guys comfortably. I don't think I'm starting them if I can pivot. And I know we've talked about the offense, the Giants offense with their wide receivers and everything. Mm-hmm. Just feels like one of those games where it's just going to be too murky in that backfield if they were to both play. And yeah, I'm not doing it.
Yeah, I go back to last week when the Giants went to Seattle and upset the Seahawks without their number one receiver and their best playmaker on offense and Neighbors, without their number one running back in Singletary. I just feel like the NFL, as cookie cutter of analysis as this is, it seems like it's week to week. Like there's constantly teams that will overperform one week and then for whatever reason underperform this week. I know this game's at home, but they are a 3.5-point dog. The total's 47.5. To me, this is a game where Daniel Jones is going to be throwing, which is why I like Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson, the PPR scam or scheme, whatever, the Ponzi scheme. I love that nickname for him. It's been tremendous for Wan'Dale Robinson this year. So, yeah, I think that it's probably not a positive game script for either one of those Giants running backs. And at that point, I'll look at the receivers. But regardless of I honestly hope, like, if I have either one of those guys, I hope Singletary is inactive, and I hope we find out about it Sunday morning, right?
Yeah.
That would be
goodness, yes, please.
Because if we find out, even if it's reporting that's saying Singletary a long shot for Sunday night, okay, then I'll wait and I'll play Tracy that game because I know he's going to get the majority of rushing attempts. I don't know about passes. Eric Gray was involved in that game early, and then he fumbled, and then we saw sort of the Tyrone Tracy take over after that. So it's kind of a mess, and the fact that it's a Sunday night game, we're just going to have to be watching that like a hawk to figure out what we're doing when we're submitting lineups on Sunday. Let's move on and talk about another confusing or soon-to-be confusing running back situation. This one's in Cleveland. Kevin Stefanski said, quote, anything is possible when he was asked by the press on whether Nick Chubb would play this week against the Eagles. Now, Nick Chubb was just activated off the, was it IR or PUP or I can't remember what it was, but he could have played this past week. He did not. And I think I'm getting that right. He did not. And now could be playing this week. I am of the opinion that he does not play. I am of the opinion, Casey, even if he is active, I think I can still squeeze one more week out of Jerome Ford. So even if Chubb's active this week, I think Ford is still like a borderline top 20, top 25 guy this week, and I would be flexing him out. I just don't foresee Chubb being a significant player in this backfield his first week back, if it even is this week, after a really significant injury.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, the injury isn't something that was just, no big deal. It was a big injury, guys. So, and Jerome Ford, I agree. I was going to bring that up as well, that you could probably get one, and I'm not starting Nick Chubb the first game he's available to come back, probably, unless like the circumstances are so dire that I need to.
What about Foreman, Deontay Foreman? I released him in the last couple of leagues. I think I had him in. Is he worth keeping around at this point? It's weird because it seems like every single year, whatever backfield he goes to, he ends up taking over and becoming the man. And I felt like if it was going to happen, it would have happened by now. But Ford fended him off, and now I'm just not seeing a whole lot of fantasy goodness coming in Foreman's future, at least in Cleveland.
No, I'm not either. I'm not holding on to him. You're at that time where you're having to drop guys because of bye weeks and stuff, and you've got to make that decision. And sometimes it's kind of tough, but that's one that you might have to make.
The YouTube chat, Scott Hoyt chiming in. Are the Carolina Panthers being coy with Jonathan Brooks? Will we see him soon? I have gone back and forth on Jonathan Brooks seemingly since he tore his ACL last year. I see it happen. I'm like, okay, well, he's going to be a nothing burger in 2024 for fantasy. And then positive reports. I'm like, okay, maybe I'm back on board. And then I feel like I've come full circle again, where I'm of the belief that even if he is activated, I have low expectations, especially the way Chuba Hubbard's been playing. Like there's no reason for them to rush Brooks out there because he's been performing really well. Will we see him again soon? I'm hopeful, Scott, that we will. But at the same time, for my Hubbard teams, I would prefer that they take it slow with Brooks. I don't really know exactly what's going on there. Just knowing what I've read, knowing what I've heard, I do still think he's probably still a couple weeks away.
Yeah, they should definitely take it slow with him with the way that Hubbard's been playing. Definitely. It's probably going to be a little bit, but.
And when he comes back, it still could be like a 60-40 or 65-35 split with Brooks on the wrong side of that too.
Yeah.
Which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world for Hubbard. I mean, it keeps him fresher and hopefully keeps him healthy for the entire season rather than, grinding him down the way they've been doing. And Miles Sanders, I guess, is still there as well. So that's something to keep in mind. Okay, Drake Maye. We'll talk about Drake Maye here in how he is going to be starting, making his NFL debut as a starter for the New England Patriots this week at quarterback against what did I say earlier? Was it the Texans? I think it was the Texans this week, right?
I think.
In New England. Yeah, Texans in New England. Texans are 6.5-point favorites, total of 38. I love the Houston defense this week. I picked up Houston and Philadelphia in a lot of spots, starting those two units this week. This is not a good situation for Maye to be walking into. Normally, I think we get excited when we see a rookie quarterback coming in. Think about Jaden Daniels and how we're jacked for Terry McLaurin, and we're excited for the ground game, Brian Robinson and so on and so forth. Caleb Williams, we're excited for Odunze. We're excited for DJ Moore, Cole Kmet, DeAndre Swift. Who is that player, or who are those players in New England? Demario Douglas, Jalen Polk, Kendrick Bourne, Ramondre Stevenson, who didn't practice today. This is like it's the opposite of what Chicago did, right, for their rookie quarterback. They bring everybody except for an offensive line in to be all these great targets for Caleb Williams. New England, the cupboard is bare. And with Drake Maye in, I don't know if this is going to set him back. I don't know if it's the right – it's definitely not ideal for how the Patriots are bringing him in. Do you change any – we talked about Carr versus Rattler. Do you change anything what you're doing with the Patriots skill position guys with Maye in now at quarterback?
No, I'm not. I'm not starting them anyway. It's not changing. I'm concerned about the offensive line and Drake Maye being able to stay up, and it's just one of those things. So you were right about grabbing the defense against him because it's gonna be one of those games.
It's. I mean, we could be looking at a couple of touchdowns for the Houston D in this game too. And I'm glad you brought up the offensive line. Prior to last week, New England loses 2 starting offensive linemen, and then a week later makes the switch to, we're down these offensive, let's throw our rookie quarterback into the fire now. And it's really, really bad. Permar kind of disagrees. Really doesn't matter. Maye will make the offense better. He runs well too. He does run decently for sure. And if he does make everybody better around him, then I would say find a spot for Jalen Polk, find a spot for Pop Douglas at the end of your roster. That is actually, now that I think about it, if you have the opportunity to do this, Scott Hoyt brings this up a lot too, where the Sunday morning waivers that the FFPC has, you kind of know what you're doing with your team Saturday night, Sunday morning. But when you add that Sunday morning waiver period, you can kind of take a look ahead to the following week, right? And kind of get your team set up for that if you have the extra roster spot. And in regards to the Patriots, if Polk is out there, if Douglas is out there, well, why don't you go ahead and pick them up Sunday morning, see what happens with them with Drake Maye on Sunday afternoon. You never know. Maybe you'll walk into a flex the following week. So that's probably the proper way to handle the Patriots.
Like that.
A guy that I looked at this, Kacey, today after waivers went through last night. I think I have JuJu Smith-Schuster on 9 of my teams now. It's crazy. Again, just absolutely crazy the circle that this guy has gone through over the course of the last 3 years. He comes in on Monday Night Football against the Saints, gets Patrick Mahomes to throw him the ball 8 times. He catches 7 of them for 130 yards. Wow. Is this sustainable? Have we found the waiver pickup of the year? Is this a guy that can be expected to be involved in the offense as a quasi number 1 receiver with no Hollywood Brown and no Rashee Rice, at least at a minimum until the NFL postseason? How do you feel about Smith-Schuster going forward?
Yeah, I mean, I'm taking a shot on at least putting him on my bench, picking him up. He's got the experience, and we saw what happened last game. It doesn't happen all the time with every guy where we get high on this guy because he had a great game, and then I think JuJu is in a situation where he has that opportunity to keep doing what he's doing. So I'm at least keeping him on my bench and stashing him. Yeah.
I think at a minimum you have to do that. I was surprised I got him. One of those things that always makes me nervous with the blind bidding, where we get like $1,000 to spend. I get nervous when I'm getting a player in like all my leagues, and I'm like, oh, okay, clearly I have misevaluated how everybody else treats this guy, how good he is or how valuable he is. But Chiefs offense that is just craving playmakers at this point. He's done it before in that Super Bowl run. I mean, he did it in Kansas City with Mahomes. So I think there is something there. Bench at a minimum. And I think, the Chiefs are on bye this week, but next week as a flex, I mean, again, we're going to have more teams on. I think next week we get 4 teams on bye, or is it 2 teams? I can't remember. But we will have injury issues. I think Smith-Schuster makes sense as a flex next week. Let's do this. Who is this? Danny Deito on Twitch checking us out tonight. Should I start Deebo Samuel or T. Higgins? That is a fine kettle of fish to be in. I wish I had that to make that decision, because if I had both those guys, I'd find a way to start both of them. And Danny Deito only can start one. T. Higgins at the Giants, Sunday Night Football. Obviously, Deebo Samuel is out there tonight, and we'll talk a little bit more about Deebo Samuel in our next segment. But Samuel's a guy that I think is kind of interesting because it was all systems go for him last week, Casey, and yet it was Kittle and Ayuk and Jordan Mason to a certain degree. Deebo Samuel didn't have all that big of a game, and it does give me a little bit of pause this week. I think I'm still playing him over Higgins tonight. But yeah, I mean, I could be persuaded the other way. How do you feel about it?
Yeah, it is a great little predicament to be in because, Deebo, I think I would probably lean that way for tonight. Yeah, but I think Higgins is gonna do pretty well.
I think they're both going to have good weeks, but getting the right one. And Danny Deito saying DJ Moore and Jaden Reed as a start. Yeah, that's really good. I would be playing both those guys.
Yeah.
So I think I lean towards Samuel. A Permar 99 saying the calf strain for Samuel is still an issue, and it might be. And if you are more of a risk averse fantasy player, Danny, then I think you can go with Higgins. I don't think that's a bad start either. But we'll find out in just a little bit as we get you set for Thursday Night Football, San Francisco and Seattle. Kacey Kasem and I will have our Thursday Night Football preview going forward. We're going to talk about Juwan Jennings. Is he a flex? Is the 49ers defense actually in for a bigger night tonight than their offense? We'll also talk about Kenneth Walker and what's going on with both teams' secondaries that could be exploited tonight. That is coming up after the break. She is Kacey Kasem from the Get Real with Kacey Kasem podcast, Rotoballer, and, of course, Sunday Dreamers. I'm Eric Balkman from the FFPC. Don't go anywhere. We'll be back right after this.
We're telling ourselves happy stories about players we want to pick, less happy stories about players we don't want to pick. And part of that is being ready to abandon our own carefully crafted narratives when it's time to abandon them, right? Like, bail, this was not working, So like we come in with super hard opinions, and sometimes they work out, and sometimes they don't. The better fantasy players are the people who acknowledge quickly that, hey, this isn't working out. Doesn't mean you have to abandon a player, but it means you have to abandon the approach, and maybe you have to go with a different player. I mean, if people were playing Stephon Diggs last year down the stretch, they were only playing him because his name is Stephon Diggs. You have to be ready to acknowledge, hey, this guy's not getting the job done. Bloom and I had a big discussion about this last December, and I'm saying you can't play him right now, right? And I know that's a hard decision to make because why? FOMO. We're going to miss out on that big game. The minute I sit this guy down, he's going to have the big game. Well, maybe. But also, while he is not having great games, there are other guys on your roster having great games. And I think that's to me, the hardest thing about fantasy is like, when do I divorce myself from my narrative? When do I tell when do I acknowledge my happy story is not coming true? I need to figure something else out. And the people who are good at that are the people who are good at fantasy football.
Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. I am Eric Balkman from the Fantasy Football Players Championship, of course, being joined by Kacey Kasem from Rotoballer from the Get Real with Kacey Kasem podcast and Sunday Dreamers. Tell us about Sunday Dreamers. This is an interesting website.
Yeah. So if you check out sundaydreamersclub.com, I started a fantasy football t-shirt line. We were at the Fantasy Football Expo, actually. So we had a booth out there that was really cool to be able to like meet up with people and have them buy the shirts and wear them around. They had a little Canton shirt that I made that a lot of people were wearing. But yeah, Sunday Dreamers Club, it's on Etsy. just a bunch of t-shirts, and they're awesome.
and they're all, it's all like fantasy football themed. Like
yeah, all fantasy football themed. If there's something, if you get sniped all the time, or if you trash talk, or if you like a certain league over another, or you hate a certain setting, there's something there for you. You'll find it.
And that's and the website, once again, Sunday Dreamers
Club.
Sunday Dreamers Club.
CLUB. Yep.
.com. Okay,
Yep.
Got it. Fantastic stuff there, and we'll have some fantastic stuff coming up as we get you set for, kind of. I'll be honest with you, this is kind of an exciting night of Thursday Night Football, where we have two teams that are coming off bad losses and have the juice and the firepower that get us excited as far as fantasy football goes, in the San Francisco 49ers and the Seattle Seahawks. I want to kind of, there's only so much we can talk about here because of time, but there are a few interesting nuggets that I think are going to be affecting fantasy football players here in the FFPC regarding this game. Some people may have drafted both CJ Stroud and Brock Purdy, Casey, this year. And you have a decision to make this week. You have a chance to start Stroud against the Patriots on the road, or you could start Brock Purdy at Seattle tonight. I think most people will be starting Stroud. Is Purdy actually the better play this week?
It's so close for me. A lot of these were, thanks for doing that. But it's very close for me. I might actually go Purdy over Stroud just because of what I think the score is going to end up being like. I don't know. That's kind of a gut thing there.
Well, you bring that up, and I think this is something that I've always done over the course of playing fantasy football. I look at the totals, right? The total for the Texans-Patriots game has it opened at 44. I mean, this is prior to the season, so not really open at 44, but it was at 44 originally. It's at 38 right now in that game, whereas tonight's game, San Francisco at Seattle, that's at 49, and it keeps going up. Like it was at 46.5. It's growing and growing and growing, and now it's at 49. So there's going to be a lot of scoring tonight. It seems weird to do.
Yeah,
I do think you're right. I think Purdy is the play that we make tonight for a quarterback, if that is the situation that's facing you. Permar brought this up in the YouTube chat about Deebo Samuel. I said last week that he should have had a much bigger week based on everything that went on. And granted that the Niners weren't great as a team last week, but you catch 1 of 3 targets for 11 yards, 3 carries, and you can only get 9 yards. This is a calf injury that knocked him out for a couple of weeks prior to week 2. He was averaging 86 yards from scrimmage on about 15 touches a game. Now, since he's come back for the last 2 weeks, 92 yards, 13 touches, no touchdowns. I don't know if the calf is still bothering him. I don't know. But his 3 targets this past week, that was the season low for him. And Brandon Ayuk and George Kittle got 24 of the team's 35 targets. I like Ayuk tonight. I like Kittle tonight. They're slam dunk starts for me. Samuel, I don't know. Are you as concerned about Deebo Samuel tonight and going forward as I am? Talk me off the ledge.
No, I'm not going to talk you off the ledge.
Okay, then
I wrote down,
you're standing next to me on the ledge on this, Casey.
I did.
Right next to each other.
Okay, like Per Man said, I have it written down. Yes, after the calf injury, he hasn't been right. So it's concerning. It's concerning to see a player that go from what he was doing to what he's doing now. There's something going on there.
Yeah, and maybe he's playing through it. It's one of those things. I'm in Northeast Wisconsin here, Casey, and obviously it's Packers country. It's Packers mania here. But Matt LaFleur in his press conference today was talking about placing Luke Musgrave on IR. And I don't know if the Packers have done it yet, but they're probably going to shortly if they haven't. And he talked about how Musgrave wouldn't really tell him how bad it was or how much pain he was in. Which Musgrave, he did that in college too, where he'd be in excruciating pain. He wouldn't tell anybody. He just tried to play through it, which is what he was trying to do here. He was trying to play through the injury until he couldn't anymore. Now he's on IR. This could be a case where Samuel is trying to play through it, and he probably shouldn't be. Maybe he would be best served to be resting more and maybe taking this week off. However, Niners are 2-3.
Yeah.
You really can't afford to do that if you're Samuel. So he's out there. And I think I'm with Permar. Like, you have to take a long look at your team, and it may be difficult to sit Samuel tonight, but ultimately you might be best served by doing that because, to your point, to see a guy doing what he was doing in weeks 1 and 2, and now seeing this in week 5, and now we got to make a decision in week 6, I'd err on the side of caution, which makes Jauan Jennings an interesting play. So if you don't like Deebo Samuel, which it sounds like both of us are very skittish about, Jauan Jennings at flex, a guy who had like a 40-point breakout game with no Samuel and no Ayuk a couple of weeks ago. What about him at flex tonight in a game that is approaching a total of 50? How do you feel about him? If we don't like Samuel, should we be flexing out Jennings?
I mean, to me, he's a touchdown dependent flex. I think you're going to really have to depend on him to be able to do that. I've seen people dropping him in a lot of leagues because of the bye week and having to pick up people. I think you can throw him in flex if you're in a bind, and I don't think that it's the worst thing that you can do.
He had 1 catch for 13 yards last week. It's wild because Brock Purdy completed 19 passes last week, 8 to Ayuk and 8 for Kittle. So, and even like Jordan Mason, that's another thing too. Like, they just don't throw to this guy. He's just not collecting catches, which has been frustrating for anybody who's had him. I would also say that, juicy matchup. Sure. I think you're getting too cute if you try to play Jauan Jennings tonight. So I would stay away from him as well. The 49ers offense versus the 49ers defense tonight. I have looked at a lot of people talking up the Niners defense this week. I'm not totally sure why, because I really, really like what Seattle has going for him. The 1-2 punch in the backfield, the 3 threats at wide receiver, and then Noah Fant actually being competent too. And Geno Smith, who we'll talk about in a little bit. I mean, he's been outperforming what a lot of people thought he was going to be able to do this year. The game's in Seattle. I would be a little bit nervous starting the Niners defense tonight. We don't talk about defensive starts a whole lot on this show, but if you have the Niners defense, how would you feel about starting them tonight in Seattle, Kacey?
I'm not going to do that. Yeah. I'm not feeling that with the game total, what it's supposed to be. And just, I'd rather not do that. If I had a chance, I'd pivot.
The game logs that I'm looking at Geno Smith right now. So 28 of 40 for 284 yards at home against the Giants last week. The week before, 38 of 56, 395 yards. And then he had 289 yards against the Dolphins the week before that, 327 yards the week before that. I mean, this guy is piling up the yardage this year so far. And we found out that Charvarius Ward is going to be inactive tonight for the Niners, which might make Geno Smith's night even bigger. I think that you would probably be best served doing what we talked about earlier. Pick up the Eagles defense, pick up the Texans defense. Like those are the players that you should be starting in over the Niners. Scott Hoyt, do you really see the Niners going 2-4? No, I don't see the Niners going 2-4. But there's a lot of stuff that I didn't see happening this year that's happening, right? Like I didn't see Brock Bowers becoming legendary his first month as an NFL player. I didn't see Malik Willis coming in and looking like a Pro Bowler playing quarterback for the Packers and going 2-0. I didn't see that either. So I think Scott's probably right. I think the Niners get it done tonight, but it could be a shootout. I mean, I don't know. And if it is a shootout, Geno Smith should have a big night. Mm-hmm. If you waited on quarterback, Kacey, in your leagues this year, you could have easily drafted Geno Smith and Caleb Williams, or Caleb Williams and Geno Smith, whatever order you did it in. And now both these guys are coming off pretty solid games. Mm-hmm. Caleb Williams is in London this week to take on the Jaguars. Pretty decent matchup there. Would you rather play him in Sunday morning against the Jaguars, or would you rather play Geno Smith at home against the Niners tonight?
I think I'm going to go, and this is another one that was very close for me. Like you said, look at you. But yes, I think I'm going Caleb Williams just because of how many fantasy points that the Jaguars are giving up to the quarterback position. Like it just, I think he's going to have a great game, and I think that Geno's still going to have a good game as well, but I'm just going more Caleb Williams on this.
The Jaguars, yeah, I mean, they're kind of used to London at this point. I guess, I don't know, maybe there's not an advantage there. I mean, just as bad as Jacksonville's been playing. I think it's close. I think I'm with you. I think it is Caleb Williams over Geno Smith, but man, 3 hours from now, I could be really ticked off if Geno Smith has another 300-yard
night. You're going to be mad until, you're going to be mad tomorrow. You're going to be mad.
Until Sunday morning.
Sunday morning.
Yeah. Kenneth Walker had that awesome week. That was a primetime game that he had that, or maybe it wasn't a primetime game when he had that huge, the 12 carries, 80. Oh, yeah, it was a Monday night game. That's right. It was the Monday night game against Seattle. 80 yards, 3 touchdowns that game. He was phenomenal. Then in what should have been a smash spot against the Giants defense, a hobbled Giants defense this past week, 5 carries, 19 yards. Yeah. What a letdown, right?
Right.
Is this a good spot for him to bounce back against this Niners defense? It's not the Niners defense that we are normally accustomed to, right?
Exactly.
They can be exposed. Is this a bounce back game for him? Because I think there's other people that would say, I got some pretty good running back options this week. Maybe I could think about sitting Kenneth Walker. Your thoughts on KW3 tonight?
I mean, it really depends on who your good running back options are, because I think he's going to have a bounce back game. I think they will find a way to exploit the defense, and he can run on them. And I think that it's going to be a surprising bounce back game for him. I know a lot of people were probably down on him from last week, but no, I'd still feel comfortable playing him.
I want to do this with Kenneth Walker here. Okay, let's see if I can find it here. Kenneth Walker tonight, over or under 63.5 rushing yards, Kacey?
Ooh, over.
If I put it at 63.5, are you taking the over or are you taking the under?
I'm gonna go with the under. I'm gonna go with the under. Okay.
See, I think I might take the over.
Okay.
It's like the first time we disagreed now. I think I might take the over. Now, if I said total yards and I set it at like 80, would you say over?
Yeah.
Probably over then. Okay. All right. Yeah, and I think he gets into the end zone. I don't know what his anytime TD prop is. Maybe Matt Deutsch knows that. He's normally the guy for that. But we can agree that Kenneth Walker should have a nice night tonight, and make sure you get him in your lineups. Jackson Smith and Jigba. This is another guy too that he has been so matchup dependent with his production so far this season. He had a pedestrian game week 1, 2 catches, 19 yards, and then he absolutely goes ham in New England. 12 catches on 16 targets, 117 yards, then 3 for 39. But then the previous week, or the week after that, 8 for 51, then 4 for 31 this past week. If we go the every other theory, Kacey, this should be a good game for Smith and Jigba tonight. I'll be honest with you. I have him on 4 or 5 of my teams. I'm probably starting him on like 2 of them, maybe 3, because I think he'll be okay. But I think there's a little bit of a limited ceiling as long as Lockett and Metcalf are healthy, and especially when they get the ground game going. I'm hopeful tonight, but I'm also very cautious with JSN.
Yeah, he's been seeing targets in the red zone, so that's one of the things that I'm like, okay, like he saw. To me, that's going to be one of the things where he's going to be in that position to score. So hopefully he'll be able to. I think that he's probably going to have a touchdown in this game, at least one. I think I really have faith in him against. I feel like they're going to be able to do it.
He is at, as Matt just posted here, minus 120 for an anytime touchdown for Kenneth Walker tonight. Jordan Mason minus 180. Samuel's at plus 120, which I think that seems like pretty low odds. Metcalf plus 145, Kittle plus 150, Ayuk plus 150, and Jackson Smith and Jigba plus 205. I think that JSN one could be fun tonight if you take that one. Just to, watch the all 4 quarters and see him catch, because he got that easy one against the Giants late in that game last week. Could be a repeat performance tonight. Zach Charbonnet and Tyler Lockett. not the most talked about players at their position, even on their own team. However, there could be a situation for some FFPC players out there tonight where they are looking for a flex. Maybe they're dealing with some injuries and they don't want to mess around with whether a guy's going to be playing or not on Sunday or Monday, and they're going to lock up some production tonight. Should they be locking up Tyler Lockett in their starting lineup, Casey, or is Zach Charbonnet the guy who represents the better Seahawks flex tonight? Charbonnet or Lockett?
I think it's going to be Lockett. No offense to Zach Charbonnet, but I think Lockett is got the edge over Charbonnet in the flex spot.
Is it because you're so bullish on Kenneth Walker? That's got to go into it, right?
Yes, that's a little bit of it. Yeah, I think that I'm more on the wide receivers tonight, so I'd be going Lockett.
You're on the wide receivers. This is what I love to hear, because this is going to be a fun game to watch then, if that's accurate. Jesus Mosqueda, sit one from these guys on his roster right now. This is another good problem to have. Chuba Hubbard, DeAndre Swift, Deebo Samuel, Marvin Harrison, or David Montgomery. I love all those guys this week. I think if I can sit – here's the thing. We talked about being cautious with Deebo Samuel. Mm-hmm. This is a good way to do it. When I am sitting Deebo Samuel in favor of Hubbard, who I think is a borderline top 10 guy this week, David Montgomery, who I think is a borderline top 10 guy this week as well, Marvin Harrison, who may or may not have a big game, or who should have a big game because the Packers could be without Jair Alexander again this week, and then DeAndre Swift, who's been looking really good in the passing game as of late. I'm fine sitting Samuel when those are my other options. Yeah. The tougher thing comes in when Samuel is the player that I'm thinking about sitting, and I'm talking about like a top 25 or a top 30 running back or a top 35 receiver. Then it gets a little bit more difficult. Mm-hmm. These guys are all locked and loaded. I'm going to give Samuel the night off tonight. I would play those other guys.
Yeah, I'm giving Samuel a night off tonight too. He probably should just take the night off tonight and heal up anyway. But
you get the mini bye, right?
There you go.
Right? I mean, this would be a perfect opportunity to do it. I don't know when the 49ers bye. Oh, they have a week 9 bye this week. So if he sits out this week, he can come back and play. I mean, he's not going to sit out.
He's not, but
if he did sit, then week 7 and week 8, he could play, rest up week 9. I don't know. They're just managing it at this point. Okay, that is our look at Thursday Night Football, which I should get my screen loaded up here shortly. That will kick off in about 13 minutes here. Seahawks and Niners. If anything happens relevant to fantasy, we'll definitely bring it up on the show. But what we have to do now is put our weekly challenge lineup together, Casey. The FFPC Weekly Challenge, something that we added over at the Fantasy Football Players Championship 2 years ago, I want to say now. It's basically the same format as our world-famous FFPC Playoff Challenge. There's no draft. There's no salary cap. All you do is put your 10 players together that, in an FFPC lineup with 4 flexes, or 12 players if you want to play with kickers and defenses. Pick whoever you want. The only stipulation, you cannot pick multiple players from the same team. If you want Hurts, you can't have Barkley. If you want Jefferson, you can't have Jones. If you want Mahomes, you can't have Kelsey. You have to pick and choose here, which is the fun and maddening part of it, quite frankly, as we try to put together a lineup for this. Now, the lineup is a quarterback, 2 running backs, 2 receivers, a tight end, 4 flexes, and Casey, you are the guest co-host tonight. I will leave it up to you. Do you want to play with kickers and defenses, or do you want to skip kickers and defenses?
Let's skip kickers and defenses.
We will skip kickers and defenses. We'll be putting together a 10-person lineup here for the FFPC Weekly Challenge. Scan the QR code that Matt Deutsch has put up on the screen if you want more information on it, or if you want to enter it yourself, or just simply go to myffpc.com, myffpc.com. Casey, I didn't ask you this before the broadcast. Did you put together a lineup already, or are we going to build this together?
I have a lineup already, but if you would like to help me, because I've never actually done something like this before, so this is a fun learning experience for me.
So this is perfect. I'm glad that you haven't done this, because I think for a lot of people who have not done this before, the first thing we want to know is, how do I start? Where do I go? Like, what's the first thing I do? How did you attack this? What was the first thing that you looked at when you were building this lineup?
I looked at what games looked like they would be the higher scoring games.
Mm-hmm.
And
that's what I do too.
And then a couple of them were just like, my tight end, I just went with the guy. that I think is we'll get into it, but there's a reason why I picked a tight end. So
okay. Well, let's go through this lineup. We can start wherever you want. Quarterback, running back, receiver, tight end, flex. What do you want to give away first?
Quarterback.
Okay.
Since Lamar Jackson is who I put. So.
Which makes sense because I think that there's not a lot of, it used to be Mark Andrews, right? Was this viable tight end there. And obviously in the FFPC tight end premium scoring, Andrews was a popular pick unless you took Jackson. Well, Andrews isn't even a popular pick amongst his own teammates this year, at least for fantasy production. When Charlie Kohler is scoring touchdown, it's like, oh my God. But the one guy that you can't pick then is Derrick Henry, who's been boffo this week. Mm-hmm. What ultimately made the decision for you to go with Lamar Jackson over Derrick Henry as your Raven du jour on this team? By the way, the Ravens this week at home against the Washington Commanders at 1:00, which should be a great game. Total of 51.5.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I went with Lamar because I wanted to get somebody in there that was kind of a dual threat guy. I wanted to get somebody that I just, when it came to running back, I just kind of looked at some other guys that I kind of played around with it and looked to see, and I just felt better going with Lamar Jackson here at quarterback.
Were there any other quarterbacks you considered this week that maybe had really good matchups that came up just short in your decision to start Lamar Jackson?
When I was looking at it, let me see real quick, because I know that I
you could look at the other quarterback in his own game too. In Jaden.
Yeah, that's exactly that is who I looked at. So yes, I was looking, and I was looking at a few, but yeah, Jaden Daniels was the other guy that I was looking at. I ultimately picked somebody else from Washington. So, yeah, spicy.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that is who I decided to go with. So
you have Jackson at quarterback.
Yes.
Let's stay in the backfield. Tell me about the running backs on this squad.
Okay. I went with Bijan Robinson.
Okay.
And Jahmyr Gibbs.
Bijan Robinson and Jahmyr Gibbs. Now,
yes.
I was listening to oh God, who was it? Chris Vaccaro, Dan Williamson, Matt Modica, and Nelson Sousa on the Fantasy Empire show.
Yep.
And I didn't notice this, but I don't watch the games as closely as those sickos do. But I will say that I think it was Chris brought up, he noticed in that Atlanta game that Bijan Robinson was not running between the tackles a whole lot. He was more getting his stuff in space, and they were giving Algier the stuff between the tackles. I think that's good from a fantasy standpoint for Robinson. Get him in space. He's not taking the big hits, but at the same time, I'm kind of wondering, what is he dealing with right now as far as an injury goes? You know what I mean?
His hammy's kind of, that's the one thing that I'm like, man, it's Thursday. I'm sitting here looking at this, and I'm like, but yeah, I was like, all right, let's just at Carolina, let's just.
So the matchup trumps the injury at this point. I Robinson
think so. I'm not 100% positive, but that's the way I leaned here. So yeah.
So and Robinson obviously too. I mean, as far as the highest value touches on Atlanta, he's still getting them out of the backfield. It was great to see Atlanta just come up crazy this past Thursday against Tampa with Cousins and Pitts and London and Mooney all having fantastic games. Cousins having a career game. And maybe it'll be Bijan Robinson's turn this week. The Falcons have a positive game script for Robinson against the Carolina Panthers in Charlotte. 6-point favorites for the Falcons and a total of 47. So there could be something there. And everything we talked about with Robinson, how underwhelming he's been, maybe he's not even a chalk play here. And maybe this is a guy that you'll actually get away with low ownership and crush it with Robinson this week. That's a possibility as well. Gibbs was the other running back. That game has a total of 52. Lions positive game script for Gibbs. 3-point favorites here in this game. You chose Gibbs over Montgomery. Was it because Gibbs has the higher ceiling of the two? Because I think there's a non-zero. Well, there's much more than a non-zero chance that Montgomery actually has more touches than Gibbs this week. Just maybe not the high value ones that Gibbs is getting.
Yeah, that was the thought process that I had going there. So that's why I chose Gibbs over Montgomery. But yeah,
which makes sense. So we got our backfield: Jackson, Robinson, and Gibbs. Shall we move on to wide receiver?
Yes.
Okay. You have 2 slots here to fill at wideout. You cannot take Flowers. You cannot take London. You cannot take St. Brown. Everybody else is fair game. Who are we going with here?
Okay. So like I checked this like a million times to make sure I didn't repeat a team. I'm sure there's people out there that do that too. They're like, oh my gosh.
All the time.
Oh my gosh, what if I mess up? No, I went with CeeDee Lamb and Jamar Chase.
Which it kind of goes without saying, right? I mean, these are two of the best receivers out there. They're two of the, I mean, I'm sure in a lot of drafts this year, they went 1-2 as far as receivers go. They might even went 1-2 in the actual draft itself. So we got two pieces of this Lions-Cowboys game, 4:25 on Sunday. Again, total of 52, and the Cowboys are actually the dogs here. So you'd like to think that CeeDee Lamb is going to be more involved. No Brand. I thought this was weird. I don't know, maybe you did too. Brandon Cooks on IR before last week's game, and it was actually Jalen Tolbert that was looking really good on Sunday Night Football. By the way, fun fact, I believe this is true, but don't quote me on it. Because of the late start to that Sunday night game, Dak Prescott became the first person in NFL history to throw two interceptions in the same game on different days. If we went by Eastern time, which is where they were there in Pittsburgh. Wild, right?
That is okay. So I'm a Cowboys fan and I fell asleep. I fell asleep. I woke up at like 3:00 on the couch and I had to go watch the end of the game just before I went back to bed.
Yeah, it was a long. I mean, I had a buddy who we were at a Packers get together, and then I had a buddy say, "Hey, come over and watch the Sunday night game." And I'm like, I want to get an early start tomorrow. I'm just gonna chill out and watch it at my house. And I'm glad I didn't go because it would have taken forever to get home that night. But getting back to that game, CeeDee Lamb, 5 catches, 62 yards. Jalen Tolbert, 7 for 87 and a touchdown. Probably not likely to be duplicated in back-to-back weeks with Tolbert having another big game over Lamb. This could just be a monster game for Lamb where he just goes crazy with double-digit catches, 100-plus yards, maybe a couple of touchdowns. The Lions' defense, especially the secondary, they can be had. So this is a smash spot for Lamb. Totally agree with you there. And then as we look back at the other receiver that you chose, Sunday night game, Jamar Chase, again, a high total game. Bengals are favored in that game, but they should be able to I love Joe Burrow this week. Higgins, I think, is a strong start. Chase is the man. He was crazy good last week on that awesome 70-plus yard touchdown. So this makes perfect sense here to get explosive players who not only have high floors but very high ceilings. For your first 5 spots, you could do a lot worse. And I think this is a baffle lineup that you have put together so far, Kacey. Let's see what we do at tight end here. So I mentioned this before. You can't do Laporta because you have Gibbs. You can't do Pitts because you have Robinson. Jake Ferguson is out of play here with the Bengals. There still are some pretty good tight ends here. Which one did you pick?
Tucker Kraft.
Oh,
and I know he showed up. I know he showed up on the injury report with the groin injury, but Tucker Kraft, he's in the top 3. I mean, dude has been going off, and yeah, I just felt on that one I didn't even. The matchup didn't even bother me. It's tight end is, I got to go with some guy that's been solid.
So Tucker Kraft, and this is interesting that you bring up the injury aspect. So he has a groin that looks like that he is dealing with. I'm trying to find out the exact nature of his practices.
Yeah, I just saw it when I was writing it down, and I was like,
all right, yeah. So he was not listed on the injury report yesterday. Paul Brettel from, I believe, Packers Wire or Sports Illustrated, I'm not sure, said that he was limited in today's practice with a groin issue. They had the Packers, I mentioned earlier in the show, are probably going to place Luke Musgrave on IR. They just signed, I believe it's John Fitzpatrick off the Falcons practice squad, promoted him to the active roster. This is one that we will be watching tomorrow. If Tucker Kraft is such a baller, if he gets in another limited practice tomorrow, Kacey, I think he's going to go in a big game at Lambeau Field on Sunday. If he doesn't practice at all, that would be another downgrade, right? Where you go from full to limited to no practice. Even if he gets in the limited practice, we don't know if he's going to go. But you're right. When this guy is right, he is right as rain, and he's been crushing it so far this season. Fun question. among tight ends this season, if we fast forward to the end of the season, where does Tucker Kraft finish among tight ends? I think he's like a borderline top 10 guy right now, but over the last few weeks, he's been even higher than that. And, you think about all these other guys that were drafted in front of him, not performing. Man, this could be the Tucker Kraft season. We always talk about a player, tight end that is drafted outside of the top 12 every year that always seems to find his way to being like a top 5 or top 10 tight end. Maybe it's Kraft this year, Kacey.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it is. I mean, the guys that start out the season in the top 3, 4-ish area end up finishing the season in that same area. So, I mean, he's on that right path. For the most part, they do. Like every year, there's at least 1 or 2 that, not all 3 don't fall out. So
I think, honestly, what could hold him back is the fact that Jordan Love is a good quarterback and doesn't lock into one player. And they have so many good players there.
They do.
Christian Watson was back at practice yesterday, and he might be able to go this week. Romeo Doubs back off suspension. He's going to go this week. You still have Jaden Reed. You still have Dontavian Wicks when he can catch a ball. And then Josh Jacobs out of the back. So the one thing that could hurt him, I mean, outside of injury, is the fact that, he's never going to be the focal point on his team for receiving the way that Sam Laporta is or the way that Travis Kelce is. Because there's just so many good players in Green Bay. But I love that pick. That is a pick to win right there. When you get Tucker Kraft with all those other guys, I love it. We still do have 4 flex spots that we need to figure out here, Kacey. Let's take the first guy off your flex list.
Yeah. Okay, let's go. I'm going to go with DJ Moore.
Okay.
So.
DJ Moore, who is going to be playing in London against the Jaguars. I had one dynasty league where, and I know nobody cares about your fantasy team, but I have one dynasty league where I have like 5 or 6 really good options at receiver, and DJ Moore didn't make the cut last week, which sucked because he had such a great game. He could be in for another big game against Jacksonville this week. The connection when we talk about all these different receivers that Chicago has, and I think somebody might have been Scott Hoyt posting, does Keenan Allen get well this weekend? Get well is it's a relative term, right? I mean, he could have a solid game, but the one guy I am trusting in the Bears passing game or receiving game, I should say, is DJ Moore. That guy is as safe can get for the Bears this year. So I like that pick as well. Your second flex, Kacey.
Saquon Barkley.
Saquon Barkley is going to be your third running back on this roster. And he is coming off the bye, which is big. He is coming off the bye, and he is taking on the Cleveland Browns. So this is a game where the Eagles are 9.5-point favorites. This is a game where they should be running out the clock at the end, trying to soak this lead that they should have against Cleveland. A game where maybe Saquon Barkley doesn't bust off like a 50, 60-yard touchdown catch or run, but this could be a game, 20-plus carries, 120, 130 yards, maybe a couple of touchdowns. It just makes sense that he is going to get a lot of volume here, which I think played a role in picking Barkley.
Yeah, definitely did. That definitely did. I looked at that, and so, yeah.
So we're going with Barkley and Moore as your first 2 flexes. Your penultimate flex pick this week, Kacey. Who is it?
Okay, so I have so I went Terry McLaurin.
Okay.
So
when you said, oh, I already have a commander, I was thinking it was going to be Brian Robinson, but you went McLaurin here instead. Why was McLaurin the pick?
It's the matchup. I think he hasn't been Terry McLaurin, scary Terry McLaurin, but he's been pretty solid. And I think this matchup, it's a favorable one for him. It's kind of just a bold prediction I had that he'd be higher than where he's being ranked right now. So
I think when you think about for the FFPC Weekly Challenge lineups, you can play in a 10, a 30, or 100 team league, and the Tucker Kraft Terry McLaurin combo here, this might be a really spicy one for a 100 team league, right? Because if McLaurin you think about that, if McLaurin goes off, he might outscore Daniels. If McLaurin goes off, he's for sure outscoring Brian Robinson. And then Tucker Kraft, too. There's going to be a lot of people picking Jaden Reed and Josh Jacobs, or maybe even Jordan Love. And if Kraft and McLaurin, the combination to go up, this will be a tough team to beat. So McLaurin there is your commander. And the final player on your week 6 weekly challenge, Kacey, is who?
Wandale Robinson.
Oh yeah, some more spice for the gumbo. I love it. This is great. This is great. Or maybe since he's a Kentucky guy, this is a more vanilla spice in the bourbon, right? For Wandale Robinson here, as DK Metcalf just catches a 30-yard pass from Geno Smith. The Seahawks now have it. Oh, it's now 3rd and 5 from San Francisco 25. We'll give you the update on that. Wandale Robinson for the Giants. We talked about Malik Neighbors earlier. We're both of the opinion he doesn't play. Robinson still was good. He was good with Neighbors. He was good without Neighbors. And you're betting that he's going to be good with or without Neighbors this week again on Sunday Night Football against Cincinnati.
Yep. That's exactly what it was. So, yeah, I was Wandale. I know Slayton, whatever. I love Slayton too. But, Wandale is the guy that's seeing the targets. And Daniel Jones is going to get him the ball.
He is going to get him the ball. He did last week too. And I think that's the great thing is we have seen Wandale Robinson be a very successful football player, regardless of whether Neighbors is out there or not. And we should see another night from the Ponzi scheme where he gets 10 catches for 60 yards or whatever, but it still counts. So the lineup once again for Kacey Kasem's FFPC Weekly Challenge Week 6 lineup. We're looking at Lamar Jackson at quarterback. The running backs are Bijan Robinson, Jahmyr Gibbs, Saquon Barkley. Receivers will be CeeDee Lamb, Jamar Chase, DJ Moore, Terry McLaurin, and Wandale Robinson, with Tucker Kraft at tight end for the Packers. You can play that lineup if you want at myffpc.com. You can go there right now and play in the weekly challenge. You can't play in the Thursday one anymore because the lineup's locked because the Thursday game just started. But you can play in the Sunday one. That locks at 1 p.m. Sunday. And utilize all these players. We have no Seahawks. We have no Niners here. So this lineup is all yours if you want to use it, viewers out there watching the Better Sports Network tonight. That will complete segment 2 of our program tonight. I do want to step out, take a quick break, catch our breath, maybe get something to drink. When we come back, we have some starter sits going on in fantasy football in the FFPC. We'll get into players like Roschon Johnson, Jalen Tolbert. We'll talk about Cade Otton will come up, Justin Fields, Daniel Jones, and much more. We'll also give you an update on what just happened in that Niners Seahawks game. Don't flip it to it because they're at commercial right now. Pretty interesting play. We'll tell you about it when we come back. She's Kacey Kasem from Rotoballer, Sunday Dreamers, and the Get Real with Kacey Kasem podcast. I am Eric Balkman from the FFPC. This is the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Something called perpetual reloading to ensure something called a permanent championship window with FFPC Dynasty Leagues. How do we make sure that perpetual reloading is what we're doing in our rookie drafts every year to make sure that we're always competing for titles year in and year out?
Yeah, so we always have this tension between playing a little bit for the future and playing for the present. You'll have drafters jump into the startup. They'll draft the veterans. They're trying to win in that first year. Sometimes they do. I don't want to in any way, shape, or form suggest that doesn't work, because you see some of those teams compete and win titles. And yet, when we're thinking about the best way to control your chances to win, you want to be in the playoffs year after year. You want your championship window to always be open. You don't want to get to a point where you build, and then have a couple of years where you're going for it and then you're rebuilding again. You want to be in it every year. You want to get as many buys as possible so you don't have to compete in that quarterfinal round. You build a more powerful team. You can't control the injury that you have to the key player that cost you a title, or the 50-point game that a non-elite player like Amari Cooper scores and knocks you out. You can control having one of the best teams every single season. The way that you do that is you build depth in your player talent across all those positions. You build depth in your picks. In order to execute some of those types of things, you trade down, you trade peak players, you trade young players. You've got to trade things that people want. A lot of times I think when people are trying to reload or rebuild, they're trying to trade distressed assets at a level that the rest of the group isn't interested in, and then you feel like you can't move. If you're going to make trades, you got to trade things that people want. You can also trade 2 for 1.
It was an interception by Mustafa from the Niners, picking off Geno Smith, who was trying to hit Tyler Lockett on a deep, it looked like a post or a crossing pattern, I couldn't tell. But he picks it off at the 2. The Niners take over at their own 3-yard line. That is where we're at on Thursday Night Football. Welcome back to the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. Eric Balkman here, along with Kacey Kasem from Rotoballer, the Get Real podcast, and of course, Sunday Dreamers. The question I want to answer right away from Twitch before we get into our start sits, Swamp Donkey. I think it's Swamp Donkey RL. God, just pick a normal name, people. This is the old man in me shaking my fist.
I can't even read it. These glasses are not helping.
Yeah, no, I probably need some. That's my issue. Would you guys rather have Stephon Diggs or Brandon Ayuk and David Montgomery? Now, if you are playing in a 10 or a 12 team league, normally I'd say you got to get the best player in the deal, right? So give me that. I'm not convinced that Diggs is the best player in this deal. He might be. And certainly going forward, I think with Nico Collins on IR for the next 4 weeks, Diggs could be good. But man, you sweeten that deal with David Montgomery. I'll take my chances with Ayuk and Montgomery. I think I'd rather have the two in this deal rather than the one, which I almost never agree to, Kacey.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, here I would definitely take Ayuk and Montgomery. So
yeah, I think the question is how crazy does Diggs go with Stroud while Collins is out the next 4 games? 4 games at a minimum. I mean, he could miss more time than that too. That's the other thing to keep in mind. But with Tank Dell there, I do think it's going to be well. I don't know. I go back and forth on this. I just really like Montgomery. I always have, and I think Ayuk is, especially if Samuel's dealing with this calf strain. I mean, it could be Boffo weeks coming up for Brandon Ayuk, who, remember, he basically missed all of training camp. He's still kind of just getting done with his training camp right now, and he might be ready to take off. So take Ayuk and Montgomery, Swamp Donkey, and go with God. A sentence I did not think I would be saying when I woke up this morning. Let's get into some start and sits here, Kacey. Buccaneers running backs. I think I brought this up on one of my shows. I can't remember. But if you drafted Rachaad White in a closed 12-team league, you may have drafted Bucky Irving as his backup, right? In case anything bad happens. Now we have to have a serious conversation. Has the apprentice become the teacher? Has the son become the father here? Would you play Bucky Irving at New Orleans over Rachaad White? And I know Rachaad White is on the injury report this week. I'm going to get what's going on with him. But in a vacuum, how do you feel about it?
Yeah, I think he is starting to become the teacher. The son is becoming the teacher because I just feel like he's been efficient when he's got those touches. He's eating into White's production. There's all kind of it's just a matter of time. So I think Irving is the go there.
Yeah, I did. This is kind of ominous too. An hour ago, it was reported that Rachaad White not on the injury report for Wednesday, but for today's practice, downgraded to did not practice with a foot, midweek downgrade. This is bad. And he might actually be closer to being doubtful rather than questionable at this point. We'll see what he does in practice tomorrow. But I think what you just said rings true. Regardless of if Rachaad White practices, he's dealing with something right now. Bucky Irving's probably the better start against New Orleans. And we'll see what happens. Rico Dowdle or Travis Etienne. This is an interesting one for people who drafted Dowdle as, just maybe a number 4 running back on their team. And not only has he been putting up numbers and getting involved with the Dallas running game, but passing wise, he's been catching passes and he's been getting into the end zone with passes too here going forward. So if you have a chance to bench Travis Etienne in favor of Rico Dowdle, are you doing it or is that too aggressive?
I don't know if it's actually too aggressive. I don't really like Dowdle's matchup this week as much as, I mean, he showed last week what he could do against that matchup, but, Travis Etienne, he's kind of banged up too right now, right? His shoulder, and you got Tank Bigsby there. Like it's, I think I would probably lean Dowdle. It's not getting too cute or anything. I think that even though because of his pass catching abilities, I think that playing Detroit, I think he'll be able to edge Etienne this week.
I will bring this up, and I brought it up already. High total in that Cowboys-Lions game, right? 52 or whatever it's at. Rico Dowdle's healthy Travis
Mhm.
Etienne is dealing with it. What did we say? Was it a shoulder or something?
It's shoulder.
Shoulder, yeah. Okay. And then let's look at the other guys. We have Dalvin Cook, who has not even close to the active roster, at least as far as I can tell. And Ezekiel Elliott, who's been okay at best.
Yeah.
Whereas Etienne not only has Bigsby breathing down his neck, Etienne might be reading the Bigsby on the back of Bigsby's jersey because he's chasing him right now, right? So that's a red flag.
Yes.
When it comes down to this, it seems weird, but in a vacuum, in a 1 week play, 1 week season here, I think you play Dowdle over Etienne. The matchup, the running back room, the way these guys are being utilized right now. You know, I can't remember who said this or where I read it, Casey, but before Etienne got hurt this past week, he was still ceding carries and touches to Tank Bigsby when Etienne was healthy.
Yep.
And if that's the case, like, okay, there's too much here going on. It's not worth taking the risk. Start Dowdle over Etienne. It feels weird, but I think that you have to do it. Now, with 4 teams on bye, some high volume or some high value fantasy teams, you might have to make a tough decision on your second flex in the FFPC. Roschon Johnson in London taking on the Jaguars, or Tyjae Spears, who is coming off the bye for the Titans to take on the Colts, who still, if memory serves me correctly, still has a really bad rush defense.
Yes.
And Spears has been valuable out of the backfield as well. I think these guys are both ascending players right now. But who do you start this week if you can only play one?
Yeah, I think I'm starting Spears this week going up against the Colts because their defense, like you said, they're giving up the second most rushing yards per game. So he could break one off. Very easily could break one off. Yeah, so I'm going Spears.
Spears is like, I think that he is more, it's more of a 50-50 split in Tennessee, right? Whereas Chicago, I don't think we're at that level yet. And we have still Khalil Herbert gumming up the works there too.
Yeah, he's still in the mix.
Right, which is frustrating. Like, just pare it down to 2 or 1, for fantasy purposes. Roschon Johnson did get in the end zone last week, but I think I am going to side with a better matchup for running the football for Tyjae Spears, and the fact that he should get more volume than Roschon Johnson. I'm going to go with Spears there as well. That is our running back start and sits here as we move to receivers. And let's stick with the Titans here. Calvin Ridley, let's put him up against Lad McConkey, the rookie out of Georgia, who is now with the Los Angeles Football Chargers, who are taking on the Broncos in the Mile High City this week. You have Calvin Ridley at home against the Colts. If you can only play one, Casey, who is it? McConkey or Ridley?
I think it's going to be Ridley for me, with the deep targets that he sees leading the team there, and playing the Colts. I just, that's who I'm leaning, is Ridley.
Yeah, it's close.
It's very close.
Yeah.
Another one of those fun ones, but it wouldn't be fun without it being that close.
I worry about, like, you have Patrick Surtain in Denver.
Yep.
And without, like, I don't know who you try to shut down. If you're Denver, do you try to shut down Ridley or do you try to shut down Hopkins?
Right. One of them, I think, is Hopkins is intriguing for me this week just because of that.
Well, who do you I see, for like me with Surtain? I don't know if he travels with any.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, that's the thing. So
which means that Surtain will probably be on Ridley, but not for the whole game.
Not for the whole game.
And McConkey he's still a rookie. He's still been hit or miss. So yeah, I lean towards Ridley, but now this is another one too. I always make the joke. We do this show on Thursday night. Ask me Friday morning, McConkey or Ridley, and I might say McConkey. So I change my mind on stuff like that. The first score has taken place on Thursday Night Football. The Niners got a huge 38-yard run from Jordan Mason to take it down into Seahawks territory. However, they were unable to cash in on the touchdown. They had to settle for a Matthew Wright field goal. Matthew Wright hits a field goal from 25 yards out. Niners up 3-0, 3:58 to go in the first quarter. Deebo Samuel, 2 carries, 10 yards, 1 catch for 11 yards. Juwan Jennings has literally equaled exactly what he did last week already. 1 catch for 13 yards. Ayuk not yet in the scorebook. Kenneth Walker, 3 carries, 5 yards. DK Metcalf has that 30-yard catch. That is the only completion for the Seahawks. We'll give you updates on that for the remainder of the show. Rome Odunze and Jalen Tolbert, a second-year guy and a rookie here. Odunze having a plus matchup in against Jacksonville in London Sunday morning. And Jalen Tolbert, the guy we talked about earlier, he came through big time. You put CeeDee Lamb on your Week 6 weekly challenge lineup. That doesn't necessarily preclude Jalen Tolbert from having another big week this week. I'm of the opinion when Cooks gets off IR, he will be staring the number 3 job in the face because I think Tolbert takes over the number 2. He doesn't look back. I lean towards Tolbert here in what could be a fantasy bonanza between the Lions and Cowboys. How do you feel about it, Kacey?
Yeah, I'm leaning that way too. Rome is very I was very confused here at first, like which one do I go for? Because Tolbert hit last week. Is he gonna hit this week? You know, that this and the other. But like you said, when Brandon Cooks comes back, he's gonna be wide receiver 3, and Tolbert's gonna. So I'm leaning Tolbert in that game as well. That game we've already talked about it plenty, but yeah, I think he's gonna get the work.
I should have looked back on this, and I'm gonna look back on it right now. So you have 2 players in the Baltimore-Washington game. You have 2 players in the Detroit-Dallas game. Cincinnati is playing the Giants on Sunday night. You have 2 players in that game. And then so that adds up to 6. No, hold on. Yeah. And then you got Atlanta, Green Bay, Chicago, Philadelphia. Okay. So you really did practice what you preached in going with those high total games. You got a lot of action in that. And when we'll see what happens there going forward. I apologize to Marky 219. I did not see this till now, watching us on Twitch. Let's get into his questions. He wants to know who he should drop for an extra defense because he doesn't want to cut Minnesota's defense in their bye week. He can drop David Njoku, Mark Andrews, Michael Pittman, or James Conner. I'm going to tell you right now, don't cut Pittman, don't cut Conner. This comes down to Andrews or Njoku. Yeah. I don't have a real strong feeling on this either way. I know which way I'm leaning, but Kacey, cutting one of these tight ends for another defense, A, should he do that? And B, which one would it be if he should do that?
Well, it's fine because I did that as well. I have the Vikings defense, and I dropped a guy that I had at the bottom of my roster that I was like, okay.
Who did you drop to pick up another defense?
Whittington.
Oh, Jordan Whittington. Yeah.
Yeah. Sure. But he's got, I'm pretty sure that I'll be all right in that league. It's fine. It's fine.
Whittington is also he's on bye this week.
Yep. He's on bye. So he's not even showing up when people are looking. I'm good. I'm good. Right. Whatever. But yeah, I would drop one of the tight ends. Who I'm leaning is, doesn't it feel weird to say Andrews?
Yeah.
That's all I can say. But
I look at it from this standpoint. Who is more likely to help me in the middle part and the end part of the season? Maybe this is just me being pig-headed and stubborn. I'm unwilling to say that Mark Andrews is done. Like he's not going to be fantasy worthy this season. David Njoku, while he is the tight end on Cleveland, the offense, Kacey, has been so bad. I can't really envision a scenario where David Njoku is giving me Boffo points at the end of the season. But I can see a scenario where Mark Andrews turns it on. He starts clicking with Lamar Jackson. And that's why I'm leaning towards dropping Njoku for another defense here. I don't have the Vikings defense anywhere, so I haven't had to make this decision. But the fact that you do and you came to the same conclusion of dropping a player, maybe that's what you do. Would you, if you were Marky 219, would you be dropping Njoku or Andrews for another defense?
I'd probably drop Njoku for the other defense. Like you had explained, especially with what scenario can you see, and Andrews, but I wasn't really high on Njoku to start the season, so I don't feel as gross dropping him.
Exactly. Then the other one too. Does he play DJ Moore or does he play James Conner this week at flex? For me, it's DJ Moore here, assuming full PPR.
Yeah, I agree on that. DJ Moore for me.
He also said, I'm thinking of picking up TJ Hawkinson later on, if that would be a good decision. Yes, it'd be an excellent decision.
Mm-hmm.
My whole thing on Hawkinson this year was, in drafting in some high stakes leagues and seeing where he went in the FFPC, I was like, you understand if you're going to soak that much draft capital into him, he's going to be sitting on your bench for quite a while. You're not going to want to cut him.
No.
I stayed away from him. It didn't make any sense. I also didn't think that the Vikings would be in such a good quarterback spot as they are right now, with Sam Darnold looking like an MVP candidate. And that was a huge concern of mine. I'm not concerned about the quarterback there anymore.
I'm not either.
Which means Hawkinson, when he comes back, should be a factor right away. So, yeah, I mean, if you can pick him up, that'd be great. Maybe that's what you do if you're Markey here. If you pick up a defense this week, to play while Minnesota's on bye, and then you drop them after this week in favor of TJ Hawkinson. I'd rather have Hawkinson than Njoku, I'll tell you that.
Yeah, for
so
sure.
Then you drop that defense, you pick up Hawkinson and leave Njoku out there and let somebody else deal with him. That's probably the way to play it here. Okay, so let's move on. The last one here, a former Packers receiver versus a current Packers receiver. Who would you rather start this week, Kacey Kasem? Romeo Doubs against the Arizona Cardinals at Lambeau Field for the Packers, or former Packer Allen Lazard? Now, before you answer this,
okay,
I was of the opinion that Allen Lazard was a nothing burger. It was going to be a nothing burger this year, and really had no interest in playing him. Then I look, and one of my buddies who drafted Allen Lazard, and just to the point where I thought he was like president of the Allen Lazard fan club, the way you talk about this guy. I had to take a hard look at this. His games this year, 6 for 89 and 2 touchdowns, a clunker, 2 for 11, not even a clunker, 3 for 48 and a touchdown the following week, then 5 for 58, then 4 for 34 and a touchdown. He's had one bad game so far this season. Now, I don't know what's going to happen. We talked about this at the top of the show. We don't know what's going to happen with the Jets offense with Todd Downing calling the plays now and Jeff Ulbrich is the head coach. But Lazard, you can make the case that he should be out there for you every week the way he's been performing, whether it's getting high volume or whether it's getting touchdowns. He is making himself fantasy worthy every week. Romeo Doubs, the younger, more exciting player, is on an offense that, again, has a lot of other options, and he doesn't always get the ball, a.k.a. why he was suspended this past week because he was ticked off about his role on the team. This is an interesting one, something I never would have thought would be anything but a slam dunk answer at the start of the season. It's a difficult one. Romeo Doubs or Allen Lazard this week, Kacey?
I'm going Allen Lazard this week. You gotta stay with. 4 touchdowns. He's been targeted like Aaron Rodgers is 10 targets last week. He's getting peppered. So I gotta, even if he had that one bad game, I still gotta, ride him while he's at.
I can't really make a good case. I mean, the case I would make for Doubs this week was, okay, well, squeaky wheel gets the grease. The total's like 49. They're going to be passing all over the place. Start Doubs. I can't get behind that because you could easily make that argument for Watson or for Reed or for Tucker Kraft, so I can't do that. Allen Lazard, say what you will, he's been heavily involved, and it's not fluky because part of the reason he's on the Jets is because of the quarterback who wanted him there, and the quarterback has thrown him the football.
And I was just like you too. I was like, Allen Lazard's wrote about him at the beginning of the season. Nah, I don't want to deal with that. I don't want to deal with it, but actually I kind of do now.
Yeah. It's to the point where, like, I want to pick him up at the back end of my roster, and he's taken everywhere, and he should be. I mean, the way he's been performing. Sebastian Rosero, would you trade Bijan Robinson and Rachaad White for Christian McCaffrey, Puka Nacua, and T. Higgins? Full PPR. He needs help. He's 1-4. Well, here's the thing, Sebastian. I think that you would make this deal if you were 4-1. right? If you're 4-1, you can afford to take on McCaffrey. You can afford to take on Nakua. And then at the end of the year, when you inevitably make the playoffs at 4-1, you're really loaded to go on a run. If you need help now to pull yourself out of that 1-4 swoon, Christian McCaffrey's not helping you for at least another couple of weeks. Puka Nakua is probably, in my opinion, not helping you for another month. So no, I would not make this trade, Casey. I think Sebastian puts himself even more behind the 8 ball if he makes this deal.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was thinking when I saw this question too. If it was opposite, then yeah, but the fact of the matter is it's not going to help you right now. So
and the other issue too is like we assume Bijan Robinson's playing hurt, and Rachaad White did get the midweek downgrade. I don't know if your trading partner is going to be on board. Like, part of the reason that your trading partner would want to make this deal is to get healthy. I don't know if he's getting that much healthier with Bijan Robinson and Rachaad White right now too. So let's move on and talk about tight ends, Casey. Tyler Conklin or Pat Freiermuth. Now, if memory serves me correctly, I do believe Pat Freiermuth got added to the injury report today for the why can I not find it here? For the Steelers. Let's see if I can find it. At tight end, which is interesting. Yeah, he was limited in practice today with a calf injury. He was not on the injury report yesterday, and now he is today, which is not good. So that has me leaning towards, again, a player with a lower ceiling, but a player who's been doing it, except for the first 2 games of the season. He's been doing it really well, and that's Tyler Conklin. I'd rather play Conklin over Freiermuth at this point. The Steelers matchup this week is the Raiders in Las Vegas. So, I go Conklin here.
I'm going Conklin here too. I am. So
I think that one of the, this is why you don't overreact. One of the guys that I tried to get on all my teams this year was Conklin because he had finished with 60 plus catches in the previous 3 seasons. And now he gets a real quarterback throwing to this year in Aaron Rodgers. And then I just got so frustrated with him after the first 2 weeks. I cut him in maybe 3 or 4 leagues. And I still have him in 3 or 4 leagues, but man, I wish I had him in all of them, as my backup tight end, one of those things. I always say on this show, it's a running joke. I am a weak man when it comes to benching studs, quote unquote, for players that I drafted as backups. And this is a perfect example here. How strong is Bucky? Is he strong enough to start Cade Otton this week over Mark Andrews? Mark Andrews, who obviously was a top 5 tight end drafted this year. And you have him taking on the Commanders in Baltimore, or Cade Otton is going down to the Big Easy to take on the Saints. Which one between these two? Casey, are you a stronger woman than I am man to pick Otton as your starter over Andrews this week?
Yes. I don't know. I'm just saying I'm starting Otton over Andrews this week.
Because you are strong and I am weak because I can't do it.
Well, I know I like Freiermuth a lot and I really do, but I don't know. Saints are giving up decent yardage to tight ends, and I don't know. I just feel like it's going to be one of those games where he gets a few more targets than usual.
Yeah, and it could be too. My issue too is I don't want to be the guy who sits Mark Andrews the week he goes 7 for 111 and 2 touchdowns. That would really, really tick me off.
Yeah, Mark.
And maybe maybe he's in no danger of doing that too. The way he's been playing this year.
Yeah, I mean, it is. It's so hard to sit Mark Andrews. I get it.
Yeah, but I will say it's getting easier by the week.
It is getting easier. If it was if it wasn't Otton, I can, if it was
War Eagle 2178 on Twitch. Jaden Daniels or Joe Burrow this week. I think to your point, or not to your point. I think to how you built your FFPC Weekly Challenge roster, Casey. Unless it's Lamar Jackson, I'm playing Jaden Daniels over everybody else.
Yeah, that's how I feel too.
I like Burrow this way. I think Burrow's going to have a good week. But,
no, he is.
But Daniels, the upside there, what he has been able to do week in, week out, just when it comes to just not turning the ball over, moving the ball downfield and just getting points. I think has been tremendous for a rookie quarterback. And then you think about some of the amazing plays, that dime that he threw to Terry McLaurin on whatever it was, Sunday night or Monday Night Football last week or 2 weeks ago or whatever, to essentially ice that game to get the victory. I mean, that's just insane what he's been able to do. So yeah, Jayden Daniels for sure. Deep FFPC league question here, starter sit. Is it it's the battle of rookie tight ends here. Who would you rather play this week between Eric All Jr., who is going up against the New York Giants, or the guy he'll be facing in that game for the Cincinnati Bengals, or excuse me, for the New York Giants, Theo Johnson, who is hosting All's Bengals? You can only pick one of these guys this week. Which rookie tight end are you going with?
I'm going with Johnson. He was a start for me at tight end this week if you're in need of a tight end.
Mhm.
And yeah, I'm big on him this week, especially again with Neighbors out and then probably out, and the Bengals giving out. They give up pretty fourth the most fantasy points to tight ends, I believe. So like I think Theo Johnson. Eric All though. Never mind. I like Eric All, but I really like Theo Johnson this week.
Theo Johnson is the more athletic one. I wonder with Eric All, because he dealt with some injuries at Iowa. I wonder if he's still a young man, but I wonder if that has taken away some of his athleticism. Theo Johnson, I mean, wasn't he like a 9.99 RAS score at the combine?
Oh, yeah.
It might have been a perfect 10.
We were just talking about, I was just talking with Nate Polvo about that.
Mhm.
So like, yeah.
I am of the opinion that when you can get a guy who's running as many routes as Theo Johnson is, when the Giants are in desperate need of playmakers, you're going to go with Johnson over All. I mean, think about the opportunity. Who has the more of the opportunity to get a higher volume this week? Johnson, where he's, probably just fighting for targets from Slayton and Wan'Dale Robinson, or Eric All, who's got to deal with not only Jamar Chase and T. Higgins, but Chase Brown out of the backfield, Zach Moss out of the backfield, and something called Andrei Yoshivash, or whatever his name is, a guy who's been consistent this season. So I think it's Johnson here, and I feel pretty comfortable about that. Let's go on to quarterbacks here. And now let's test my mettle. I am going to say Jayden Daniels over Josh Allen this week. I think in your start-sit column that you just wrote, did you have Josh Allen as a sit this week, Kacey?
Yeah, I did. I did. I have to be a little spicy with my start sits.
Mhm.
So I got a little spicy with it, but yeah,
But you're sitting him in favor of Jayden Daniels.
You're
right?
sitting him in front of him. It honestly, it all depends on who else you have. Now I know if it's a one quarterback league, you may have only drafted Josh Allen,
Mhm.
and okay, roll with them. But I'm Jayden Daniels. I mean, like you said, Lamar Jackson, Jayden Daniels. Like that's what's up this week.
I know that there are plenty of people in the FFPC main event and the Fantasy Pros Championship that drafted Josh Allen early, and then they waited till another 10 or 11 quarterbacks went off the board and then grabbed Jayden Daniels. Those leagues started drafting in like June or July or whatever it was. And Jayden Daniels didn't really make his ascent until training camp, where he became like quarterback 7 or quarterback 8 off the board in the final week of drafting with the FFPC. So you could easily have both those players on your team. And if that's the case, then yeah, you're sitting Josh Allen for Jayden Daniels this week. It's just crazy. We do have an update in the game tonight. I must be behind here because our producer Matt Deutsch has already let us know that the Niners have found their way into the end zone. A 76-yard touchdown pass to one Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel, 2 catches, 87 yards, and a touchdown. Right when we get done saying you got to be cautious with starting him, and it's not
ears were burning.
Yeah, his ears were burning. It looks like basically what happened. It was a great play action fake by Purdy. The pass wasn't really like a 9 route down the field. It was one where he was finding a hole in the zone. The safety came over, went for the pick, was not close to the pick. Samuel gets it. Nobody else in front of him. He runs all the way for the touchdown. So it was poor coverage. It was a bad decision on the safety, but Samuel made the play, and now he's at how many FFPC points? 16.7. 13 minutes to go in the second quarter. And as Matt Joyce said, the Debo Samuel plus 120 anytime TD hits as the Niners up on the board 10-0 over the Seahawks. The fighting Geno Smith's about to get the ball back. We'll give you updates on that the next couple of minutes before we sign off tonight. Couple more starter sits here tonight for you, Casey. Justin Fields or Caleb Williams? We talked about Caleb Williams and his prime matchup in London against the Jaguars. However, Justin Fields been doing it with his arm. He's been doing it with his legs. He's been doing it all and getting it done. You can make the case. Well, I have a buddy who work at a local radio station here in Northeast Wisconsin. I have a guy who hosts a show at a radio station under our umbrella. He is a transplant from Pittsburgh. He worked in Pittsburgh for many years, and I was talking to him about Justin Fields after that Cowboys game, and he said, like, look, say what you will about Fields, he's not the reason they lost that game. And yet now all of a sudden we hear the talk about, if Russell Wilson's ready, we might work him into being a backup. We'll see what happens making that decision going forward. It stinks because I feel like this is the same kind of thing that happened to Justin Fields last year in Chicago with, the Bears look with an eye towards Caleb Williams. And now here we are facing a start-sit question here. Fields or Caleb Williams this week, who would you rather play? I think I know what you're going to say, but go ahead, Casey.
Do you think I was going to say Caleb Williams?
I did think you were going to say Caleb Williams.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of written in the stars, right? But yeah, I'm going that. I picked DJ Moore in my lineup, and yeah.
I look at what Fields did. I'm going to bring up that Sunday night debacle that went into the wee hours of Monday morning this past week between Dallas and Pittsburgh. Fields, 131 passing yards. He threw 2 touchdowns. He did get 27 yards on the ground. Hey, I think that's fine. But then I look at what the ceiling is for Caleb Williams, and it was much higher for him last week. Again, in a much better matchup. But I think that Williams, I feel like I'm limiting myself if I play Fields, whereas Caleb Williams is a guy that I really don't know what the ceiling is quite sure. I'm really not quite sure what the ceiling is with him yet. So that's why I'm going to play Williams. I'm with you. Williams over Fields here. Parayko on YouTube. Parayko wants to know if they should drop Dontavian Wicks for Braylon Allen. They have Breece Hall on their team, Casey. This goes into the whole, are you in a closed 12-team league, or are you in like a national, like FFPC main event or Fantasy Pros Championship? In those leagues, I don't necessarily like to have my own guys back up. I like to have other players backups. However, I think there is value in Braylon Allen, and we talked about all these talented pass catchers the Packers have in a redraft league, in a managed league where you have to make start and sit decisions every week. It's difficult to know when I thought Wicks was going to be a smash start last week, right? Because there was no Christian Watson, there was no Romeo Doubs, and what did he do? Like 2 catches for 20 yards or something like that. And now Watson is back and Romeo Doubs is back. What's the value of Wicks? Maybe the more valuable player here for Parayko is actually Braylon Allen over Dontavian Wicks.
Yeah, I think so. I think in that situation, I would rather do that. Drop Wicks, having to make those tough choices, but I dropped Jordan Whittington to keep up defense. So what do you want?
Nothing's easy. I mean,
no, nothing's easy.
This is why it's so fun and so maddening. Speaking of maddening, Laviska Shenault has fumbled the kickoff from the 49ers as he coughs it up. The Niners have recovered, and they are now driving. They have the ball 2nd and 9 from the Seattle 28-yard line. It looked like the ball was loose before his right knee came down. So it is going to be Niners football, and they are driving once again. Maybe we'll get another touchdown on the board here in the last 90 seconds. Final one here. Jared Goff or Daniel Jones this week. We praise Daniel Jones. We think he's going to have a good game. Again, I'm a weak man. I'm playing Jared Goff over Daniel Jones.
Here's my spicy start again this week with Daniel Jones. Yep. But yeah, I like it. But I mean, both those guys I'm good on, but I'm going to go with, since I've been talking up all these other guys that are on the Giants, I might as well talk up Daniel Jones. So. Yeah,
and Jones did it, with not a lot of great supporting cast around him last week. But still, I mean, Goff in that game where they should be piling on the points, both teams. Yeah, I'm going to play Goff. That will do it for our show tonight. Before I let you go, Kacey, tell the viewers where they can consume more of your content. Obviously, SundayDreamersClub.com is where to check out the t-shirts. Rotoballer, you're doing writing for. Optimus Fantasy, the Get Real with Kacey Kasem podcast, anywhere you get podcasts. Am I missing anything?
I do work with, did you say Optimus Fantasy?
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
probably. Okay, yeah. And I'm trying to keep track of everything.
Well, and Optimus
Fantasy six-pack as well.
Oh, Fantasy Six Pack. That was the other one.
Yeah, Fantasy six-pack as well.
Optimus Fantasy, are you live every Thursday at 4 p.m. Eastern? Okay. And that's with Nate, who's co-hosted the show with me before, too. Nate
yeah, he's such a, I told him I was coming on here, and he said that I would have such a blast. So he's a great guy. It is fun.
It's always fun topping up, especially with somebody I'm getting to know live on air for the first time, which is always fantastic. And I had a blast tonight. By the way, Matthew Wright, 41-yard field goal, good. 13-0 San Francisco now. So Kacey, let's do this again sometime. I'd love to have you back on. Keep doing what you're doing with the Get Real Pod, Fantasy Six Pack, Sunday Dreamers Club, Get Real Podcast, and of course everything at Optimus Fantasy as well. We will follow you on the X. I should have been promoting this all night at the Kacey Kasem.
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's me.
Fantastic. I want to thank Kacey. I want to thank our producer, Matt Deutsch. We're going to be doing a special episode, 7 p.m. Eastern time this coming Tuesday. So you'll get 2 high-stakes fantasy football shows next week on the Better Sports Network. That's going to be a blast. Be looking for that on Tuesday. FFPC Weekly Challenge over at myffpc.com for Kacey Kasem and Matt Deutsch. I am Eric Balkman. This has been the High Stakes Fantasy Football Show on the Better Sports Network. See you Tuesday, everybody.